I'm Jeanie Burton, and I am a retired United Methodist pastor. I spent 20 years in the church and then became a chaplain. And I was a chaplain at a hospital, at a retirement center, and finally at a hospice organization, and retired from that organization.
Great. Well, I'm glad to be here with you.
Yes, me too.
I don't know that much about you. I don't think in the 13 years that we've been at First Methodist that we've gotten to know each other at all.
Right.
Which I think is kind of, our bad. I don't know. It's just our paths have never really crossed.
That's right.
Where did you grow up? I mean, where?
I grew up in Pine Bluff and was raised in Carr Memorial Methodist Church, which no longer exists, but it was a small Methodist church, and parents were in that church from the time they were children. Or actually, they were both on the cradle roll together in that church. And so that was a big part of my growing up.
Did your family have a history of being clergy, or?
No, there were no other clergy in my family that I know of. My family is not that large. On my mother's side, it's larger, but my father's side, he was an only child, and so just not a whole lot of folks.
Did you have many siblings?
I have one sibling, a sister named Amy, and she lives here in Little Rock.
Cool. So growing up in Carr Methodist Church, were there any figures who were inspirational to you? Like, I want to be just like them, or they're, someone who drew you into the ministry?
Well, I don't know that these folks actually would drew me into the ministry, because, to be frank, when I was a child and young person growing up, there were no female pastors, and so I didn't even know that was a possibility. So, that would not have even been on my radar screen.
Because that didn't come till later.
Well, the first, I think women were first ordained in 1956. I was born in 1951, but I don't think there were any women in the ministry in Arkansas, for quite a while. And maybe if there were, they were local pastors and in rural communities, and I just never heard of them. So I did not know that was even an option for women. But yeah, we had some wonderful pastors at Carr. Fred Arnold was a pastor there, and still remains a good friend and a dear friend of my parents. My father's no longer living, but has remained a good friend of my mother. And then a man named Carl Matthew was also a really wonderful minister, and I think had a just great effect on a lot of people. But we had some great caring people there, and I'm sure that led to my having a positive feeling about the church. Just going on Sunday, I felt a warmth there. I felt, like it was just a place that welcomed me and cared about me, and that meant a lot.
Well, I'm a PK. Johnny's a PK.
Yeah.
And Jonathan probably hasn't heard this as much as I have, but I have constantly been told, "Oh, Liam, are you going into the ministry? You would make a great minister. You should really consider that." And I shy away from that because I feel like I've been doing that the last 20.
Yeah, that's too bad. I mean, that really is, although it's a great compliment. So, I mean, if you can just take it as a wonderful compliment. But, I mean, it does get old, I'm sure. It's kind of an assumption that sometimes people make. If the PK is a person who's kind and caring and seems to be, I don't know, talented in that way, you know. So it really is. It's a credit to you and you.
And a credit to our mom too, I think.
Oh, absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. You have to
But,
put that into the equation.
Was there one person maybe later on in your life who said, "Oh, Jeanie, you should consider this"?
No, but I don't
No?
think I was really the type of person that people would have said, yeah, she should be a minister. No,
So then,
no.
how did you come into making that decision?
Well, it happened. I was a speech therapist, and that was my first career. And I married a man that I met when I was in graduate school, and we moved to Illinois. We were there 3 years, and we divorced. So I went back to Little Rock, to Arkansas, which was the place I was from, and got a job as a speech therapist. And I just felt like I wanted something else. I wanted something more. So I started looking at other options for me, and I started attending Pulaski Heights United Methodist. And along the way, Beverly Sawyer was appointed there as an associate pastor. And that was the first time I had ever known that women could be in the ministry. And that was in 1980. And when I heard the announcement that she was coming, I thought, oh man, I'm not going to like this. This is too weird. It's too different. I just think it's going to be hard to get used to. And so when she did come and she did preaching in some of the different ministries that were assigned to her, I thought, wow. I mean, she's not that. I mean, she was great. Believe me, she was so talented and wonderful writer, wonderful pastor and preacher. But I've said this about myself too. The thing about women when they become pastors of churches is that people have to experience the unremarkableness of it. I mean, we do the same things that men do in the ministry. The roof doesn't cave in. We keep going. Life goes on. The church services go on. It's just, I mean, after a few weeks, you think, what was it I thought was going to happen, you know, with this woman being a pastor? So she opened the door for that idea to be in my head. And then, to be honest, as I look back on those years or that particular time, I think because of the divorce, I think that I was looking for a way to feel better about myself. And I was looking for a way to make myself be the kind of person I really wanted to be, to make myself be a good person. At the time, I felt kind of stirred in a way, but looking back on it, I can't say that God spoke to me and said, you need to go into the ministry. I really think it was that I needed to feel better about myself. And that's what I've said that to several people, and their reaction is always, because it doesn't sound like the right thing. I mean, you're supposed to be called into the ministry, but here's the thing. If you do ever go to seminary, you will find that people go into the ministry for all kinds of reasons. And sometimes people really feel very strongly that they're called, that God has actually spoken to them. But many times it could be that they're trying to resolve something within themselves, or they're trying to find a way to be of service to others. There are many reasons that people go into the ministry. And so that was mine. And I can say, looking back on that, it's not a bad thing that I went into the ministry. I think good came out of it. Certainly good came out of it for me, but I think it also came out of the work that I did. I think I did good work. So whether or not anybody believes God called me into the ministry, and I'm not inclined to believe that anymore, I think it turned out okay. So that's kind of how that happened. When you ask me about the person, Beverly is what I wanted to say. Beverly Sawyer opened the door for me to know that that was a possibility for me.
So then from there, what seminary did you go to?
I went to St. Paul in Kansas City. And at that time, they had a campus. It was not a large seminary, but it was not attached to any university. So it was doing pretty well at that point. Now I think they have a different kind of structure, maybe. I'm not sure that they have a campus anymore. But anyway, that's where I graduated from seminary.
And so then came back to Arkansas.
Uh-huh.
And what was your first church?
I had a 2-point charge, Bearden and Thornton United Methodist churches. And that was at that time, of course, that was when we had 2 conferences, not one. So it was in the Camden district, and that's south of here. So Bearden and Thornton, they were both small churches. Bearden was the larger of the 2, and they were just the most dear churches. I mean, I think they kind of had it in their heads, and some churches have this talent. They like to launch people into the ministry, and they certainly took me under their wing and were so forgiving. So they put up with such incompetence, and they just bore it bravely and helped me get through. So I will always be indebted to them. They were wonderful people.
And those small churches have some of the most genuine.
They really do. They really do. And just kind of teach you what church is about. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah.
Were you their first female minister?
I've been the first female pastor of every church I've served.
Was there, in those early Bearden, and was there opposition?
Yeah, there was some, but here's what's happened with me. Usually the people that are absolutely against it will leave before I ever get there. When they find out they're getting a woman, they will just find another church. The ones that are kind of on the fence will stay. They're not happy about it, but they'll stay. But once I'm there, like I said before, with Beverly, I mean, after a few weeks they go, what were we so worried about? You know, this is fine. We're just going to keep doing the same things we've always done. And they don't have any problems with it. Now, I will say, and there probably have been women who have gone into the ministry and make being a woman in the pulpit or being a woman in ministry sort of an issue. I mean, they push, I don't know how to say it, but that becomes sort of what you see instead of just you have a minister. And that person happens to be female, you know. And that's a mistake in my opinion, because I think especially the first 6 months to a year, all anybody, male or female, needs to do is just go into the church and love people. And that's it. I mean, if you can do that, you've got to put a whole lot of deposits into that emotional bank account before you start making withdrawals. And that's the thing that's happened a lot with a lot of disastrous pastorates, is that they want to make withdrawals immediately. You know, they demand this or that, or, you know, they want things. And it just doesn't work well that way. So that's been my philosophy about it.
Were there any churches that were just not a good fit that
Yes.
you were like, oh, I need to get out of here real fast?
Yeah, there, believe it or not, the one that was truly not a good fit, I just made it work, and they made it work too. I'm not going to say it was all me, but I was at a church for 5.5 years. Yeah, and it was. I couldn't say everything I believed from the pulpit, but I didn't say anything I didn't believe. So I made that work. And like I said, just try to love the people. I remember in that church, there was an older man, and his wife had to go to the nursing home, and she had dementia, and he was going through such a hard time. And I used to go over to visit him, and we had just a wonderful relationship. He would invite me over and cook me breakfast and all kinds of stuff. Well, his son was so extreme in his beliefs, kind of far-right beliefs, did not in any way think women should be in the ministry. But you know what? He loved his daddy, and his father was happy. And whenever I had been there that day, you know, he went in and his father would say, Jeanie was here today, and talk about it in a very positive way. And so I won him over. I mean, he probably still would have preferred a male, but he grudgingly accepted me after that. So we got along okay, and that with that church, it was just sort of like stepping on eggshells a little bit, but we did make it work, and that's where I met my husband. How about that?
There you go. Some good came out of it.
It truly did, and sometimes you think something happens and it's so bad, and then as time goes on, you realize, no, that turned out for the good. And here's what I'm talking about. When I was appointed to the church where I met Greg, they first put my name forward to another church, and they said, absolutely not. We are not having a woman. You're not doing this to the... And I told the bishop and the district superintendent that I would gladly go, even with their opposition. And I said, just let me try. Just put me in there, and I promise I'll do my best to kind of win them over to women in the ministry. And they said, no, I think it's just too hard. So I was crushed. You know, I just felt my feelings were hurt. But then they put me in this other church, and that's where I met Greg, and I said, you know, hey, that happened I almost wanted to write them a thank you note. Thank you for not taking me. Turned out for the best.
When did you come to First Little Rock?
That was in 1998.
I have heard somewhere that, I think it was Richard Butler Sr. said that as long as I'm here, there will be a baritone in the pulpit.
And you know, he said it to Bishop Huey, who's female. It was hilarious. When they announced my appointment, he was loud enough that people could hear him. He went, "Oh no!" I mean, this was on a Sunday morning, in the worship service. And so after all of that, I got a call from, I think it was Jim Argue. And Richard Butler and Jim Argue worked together at the United Methodist Foundation. And Richard Butler had an office there in the building. And so Jim said, you know what I think you need to do? You need to make an appointment with Dick Butler. And he went by Dick. Richard Butler is the son, you know. So, but he said, you need to make an appointment with Dick Butler. Just go by and visit with him. And I think that's probably the best way to get this going on a better foot. So I did, and we had a wonderful, cordial visit. And he seemed very, again, I don't think he was crazy about the idea of me being there, but he was okay. Didn't stop coming to church, that kind of thing. And then one day, I want to say it was about a year after I was appointed to First Church, I preached a sermon on prayer and the Holy Spirit. And there was some way I kind of explained how I felt about this particular biblical passage. And when I went out, we were at the door and he was going out, he grabbed my hand and he said, I have wanted someone to say that. And he said, I'm so glad you did. Whatever it was, and I could probably dredge it up, but it was an insight on the way prayer works, or I can't really remember. So I knew at that point that he was fully okay with me. And the fact that he would even be that complimentary, I mean, he didn't have to be. He could have just gone home and thought, I'm glad she said that. But he was just so willing to share that with me. And then I ended up doing his funeral, of course. Mm. Yeah. Mm. So, yeah. He was vocal.
Yeah. I've heard that.
It could be worse. Listen, it could be so much worse. My female colleagues in the ministry many of them have much worse than I've had. I'm lucky in that regard. I've always had congregations that were willing to give me a chance.
Have you ever felt like you were a leader in that way? You know, being a leader for other women to come into the ministry?
No, I mean, I've never thought of it that way. I think I definitely have opinions about the best way or some of the best ways to approach the ministry as a woman. Like I've said before, if you can just come in and do ministry and not stir the waters immediately, get people behind you, or get them to know that you care about them. I mean, that's a really, really important thing in my mind. And if I've shared that with people, which I think I probably have, that maybe that's been good advice. I hope so.
So you left First Church in 2004.
I did.
Was that retirement?
No. My husband got a job that he had been in graduate school and finally got his degree, and he got a job in Minneapolis. So we moved to Minneapolis for 2 years. And then he got another job which took us back to Little Rock. So that's how that worked. And then when I was in Minneapolis, I got a job as a chaplain at a retirement home. And it was just the most delightful, wonderful experience. And coming back to Little Rock, I knew I didn't want to be a pastor of a church anymore. Here's the thing about the difference between being a chaplain and a pastor. When you're a pastor, you're always on. Mm-hmm. Always. When you're a chaplain, you're on for whatever your hours are, 8 to 5, maybe you're on call one night a week or something like that. And when you're off, you're off. You really are. So it was my choice to do that. And I became a chaplain at St. Vincent. And I was there for 3 years. And then I went to Arkansas Hospice as chaplain. And that's where I retired from.
How long were you at the hospice center?
At 5 years.
5 years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That was a good experience.
Well, I do understand that constant being on feeling and how draining it can be.
Some people either thrive on that or it doesn't bother them. I that got old for me.
That's part of what, when people say, Liam, ministry? I'm like,
No thanks.
yeah, I've seen that. I've lived some of that.
You know firsthand, yeah. It is not easy, and I don't know. I was, one of my downfalls as a pastor of a church is that I didn't have good boundaries, and I know that now, but I just didn't, and maybe that's one of my weaknesses, is setting boundaries. So if you don't do that, then you really get burned out, and that definitely happened to me. I was not good at all with supervising staff at the administrative things, and that came with the territory when I took the appointment here. And of course the staff was larger than I'd ever had before. So that part of it was just not fun for me. I enjoyed preaching, I enjoyed pastoral work, I definitely loved, the people here are just beyond compare. They're just wonderful. And this is my favorite church. The favorite church I've ever served. But my job, having to do the administrative part, was, I just couldn't last too long with that. So I was here 6 years.
I feel like that's a good time.
That's a good time.
Yeah.
That is. Yeah, it is. And we were able, thanks to the graciousness of Michael Maddox, we were able to come back here and be part of the congregation. But I've tried to be as in the background as I can. And I do sing in the choir, but I don't want to be seen in that role here. I mean, I know people remember me that way, but most people now, I think it's a distant memory. So I really tried to stay in the background. I had no desire to preach again or teach again, and I've had people ask me many times, especially when we first moved back. But they now know that that's just not something I'm going to do. I retired from that. I retired from all of it. And God love all the pastors that keep on doing it over and over again. And wow, I mean, keep doing funerals, keep doing everything.
So do you do many funerals?
I do none.
None.
Now I have done, I had to do funerals in my chaplaincy work for hospice patients. And I have done occasionally funerals for people who've asked me, that I just feel like there's a special connection and it's appropriate for me to do it. And one of the last funerals I did was for my father-in-law. It was a graveside service. It was during COVID, so we couldn't have an actual funeral. But maybe it's my age or just the fact that I'm not maybe mentally in the right place, but the last few services I've done, I've cried too much during this, and who wants that? You don't want somebody standing in front of you that falls apart. So I no more. That's enough. Yeah.
I think in the 13 years we've been here, I've seen you in that role once, and that was at Jim Foster's service.
Oh yeah. That's right. Yeah, that was quite a while ago. But I did a few around that time. There was Chris Cooper's dad. I had a part in that service as well, Joel Cooper. But I'm happy to relinquish that.
To let other people do.
Let other people.
Yeah. And when you get to know people too, it's hard because then it's like you're burying your friends.
I know.
And that's a challenge.
It is very hard. When you feel that emotional connection with them, it's hard. Yeah.
And like you said, you don't want to be up there breaking down in front of people.
No. It makes everybody uncomfortable. So I mean, I think they get it, that it touches my heart, but it's still not comfortable to watch.
Have there been any moments in, whether you were a speech therapist or in the church or hospice, wherever, that you thought to yourself, wow, this is not for me anymore. I'm really being, where you were challenged by that, where your faith was
Faith was challenged.
Yeah.
Many times faith has been challenged. And I would say that today my faith is not anything like what it used to be. But I think the main thing that challenges conventional faith for me is knowing and witnessing the suffering of others. Seeing good people suffer is a big challenge. And seeing injustice and, the present situation in the world, it looks as though the good just looks like it's not going to make it, It really does. Every day I think, good people are trying and trying and trying, but I think they're being outnumbered.
It can be overwhelming.
It's very overwhelming, and so you begin to think, well, if there is something up there or out there or in there or that's supposed to be moving us along, and we have hymns that say that good will prevail, God will prevail. I'd like to see a little of that. So that's very challenging for me. I no longer believe in intervening God. That I put that aside a long time ago, because all I have to do is look at daily life, and that doesn't bear out. It's like a saying I read one time. If the map doesn't match the ground, the map is wrong. And in the terms of an intervening God, the map doesn't match the ground. I have friends that say they prayed to God when they went to pick out a new car, and I just can't square that with the cries of children who are starving and nothing's happening to rescue them. It's like that old Harold Kushner book. You've either got to say, the three things that could be the case. You've got to say, okay, God is not all powerful, because God cannot be all good and all powerful, and bad things happen to good people. You can't pick all three. You have to pick two of those. So the thing with me is that, as I said, the map doesn't match the ground when it comes to an intervening God. I don't believe that God has the power, or the better way to say it for me is that whatever power or whatever spirit we have in this world can be an empowering spirit. It can give us peace and courage and compassion and a lot of good things that are very much like Jesus. But as far as reaching in and making someone well again, I left that behind. Now, I will pray for you if you ask me to, because I know you believe it and you want it, and I'll do that for you. And I don't go into a long speech about how I don't believe that. I'll just do it.
Because it's meaningful for them.
That's right. It's for them.
I like that perspective.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, that's the only thing that works for me. You just have to do a little bit of denying to think that, to me, to think otherwise.
Do you think, keeping kind of in this similar vein of different ways of thinking, do you think that the Methodist split will eventually come back together?
I doubt it. I'm really, I hate to tell you this, but I'm not by nature very optimistic. And so I tend to think the worst, but I really don't think so. I don't think so. Mm-mm. I mean, you look at the Presbyterian Church; they haven't made it back together. So I don't think that it's probably going to happen. But I don't know. I mean, that would be a nice thing if it did.
So where does your less than optimistic head see the Methodist Church 10 years from now?
Just let me say that philosophically, I think that everything has a life cycle. Everything has a life cycle, even the Methodist Church. And it may be that we are at the end of our life cycle, and something will come out of that, and then that might be a good thing, and something come out of that. But I don't believe that the way the church is structured is, it is not, what's the word I need for that? I don't think it works well with today's needs in today's world. I mean, the Methodist Church was brilliant when the circuit riders went out, and they had the structure that went all over the country, and they were right on. But now, nah. I mean, it's just appointments. I don't think it's a good system. I don't think apportionments are a good system. I don't think, I just don't think this structure is well suited for today. And so as much as I'm grateful forever to the United Methodist Church for giving me much meaning in my life and helping me to feel better about myself and to give me meaningful work, I don't believe the denomination will survive. I think it will be a gradual, like, as I think about all mainline Protestant churches, it will be a gradual, but 50 years from now, maybe we'll be here, maybe not, or maybe we'll just be a very small version of itself. That's my thought, for what it's worth.
Do you think it's important that we preserve these historic structures like
Absolutely.
First Methodist? I mean, in 50 years' time, we might not have a congregation to support a building of this size.
Oh, well, you mean the building, that kind of thing?
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, you hate
that's a
to
good
see
question.
it. You hate to see it fall into disrepair and disappear.
Yes.
But like you said, that reality could be down the road.
Yes. And here's the thing. When I was pastor here, we had people who were in their older years, but who were extremely affluent and had so much money to underwrite many, many things here. And they could have kept this church afloat for a long time. Well, they're all gone. And new members who come in are not likely to be the kind of wealthy people that were in the church years ago. And so it's an expensive thing to keep this building up. At some point, there's going to be a crunch point, and so I don't know what they'll do with that. But what would you do with this building? I mean, what would you do with it? Make it into a restaurant?
I mean, they're really suited for one purpose.
I know, you can't do. And it's so beautiful. It really is, and it's so loved. It's so well loved. But go down the street to First Presbyterian, you can see how that was a wonderful structure at one time. And just not being able to come up with the money has led to a lot of deterioration and not that it looks terrible, but it's just there's a difference, in being able to underwrite what's needed. So I don't know. Good question.
Well, do you have any kind of last thoughts or words of wisdom to?
I wish I could come up with something that would undo the negative things I said. But I do want to say that I am very, very grateful for what I've been able to experience through the United Methodist Church, all the way from when I was a little girl and felt it was such a warm place and a loving place, and I felt like I belonged and was welcomed, all the way from that to, serving churches with churches that, despite any misgivings, gave me a chance and led me and helped me all the way. People who let me into their lives and shared their deepest experiences and feelings with me, and it's been a wonderful journey. I mean, I wouldn't take anything for it. It's been just great, and I hope I've done enough good to balance what was given to me, and I certainly wish the best for the United Methodist Church. I love it, and I wish the best for it. And I hope I'm proven wrong.
Well, thank you very much
Thank you.
for your words and your insights.
You're welcome. It's been fun.
Yes, it is.
There we go, team.
Perfect.
Okay, well,